Thank you to our friends at RefReps for their support of the From A to Zebra podcast. The full library of episodes is now available at refreps.com under the resources page. And now, Season 3, Episode 4, Letter O, Outside the Ring. Join hosts Dana Pappas and Nate Acosta with special guest Marc Ratner on the From A to Zebra podcast.
Welcome back to the From A to Zebra podcast. I'm Dana Pappas, back with my co-host Nate Acosta for episode 4 of season 3 of our show.
Today we are talking with an absolute legend in officiating in combat sports in the United States. He is our first guest from the world of boxing and UFC, who has also served as a Division I football official, a member of a Division I table crew, and a high school sports official, among other roles.
Our guest is the current Vice President of Regulatory Affairs with the Ultimate Fighting Championships, or UFC, as most people know it, and the former Executive Director of the Nevada Athletic Commission. It's a tremendous honor to welcome my friend, legend, a whole bunch of other things, Marc Ratner to the show. Marc, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks, Miss Dana. I'm delighted, and I love to talk about sports, and it's a perfect day for us, so I'm delighted.
It is, and I think the thing I'm really excited about, and I know we're going off track because I'm excited. Marc, as those of you that are listening to this are going to learn, Marc has one of the most well-rounded backgrounds in sports and officiating. And the thing that I've known Marc a long time, one of my favorite things about him is how much he loves high school sports. So as the person at the NFHS, I absolutely love that, even though he's done things at the next level and done things on a worldwide stage. The fact that high school sports are so near and dear to your heart, Marc, that means a lot to me. So thank you.
No, my only sadness about high school sports is not quite as pure as it once was, with the NILs already reaching into the high schools. But there's something very special about it, and I still love to go to games. I was the commissioner of officials till last year, but it was time for them to have the officials to have a younger voice, and I passed it on to one of my associates, and everything's going good here in Nevada.
That's good. You left it in good shape.
Yeah, and thank you for your contribution to just officiating in general. I think it's, I know you said that you're leaving it to a younger generation, but officiating isn't anything without our veteran officials and the people that have paved the way for us. So, Marc, thank you for that. Today, our topic focuses on the letter O, and that topic is outside the ring. Before we get into the topic, we would love to hear your background. Which sports did you officiate and what levels? And what other roles have you served in sports, and how did you get involved in boxing and eventually UFC?
Well, first of all, I was a marginal high school athlete, and I didn't really care about going to high school here, Las Vegas High School. I never got on a team really, but I played ball with a lot of the people. But when I went to school in Reno at the University of Nevada, and I played baseball there. I was like a second string right fielder, so not a lot of at-bats or chances. Then in my junior year there, I was a long jumper, and I jumped 20 feet, which was my personal record, so that was a big thing. But what I want to lead up to, when you get out of college and come back to town, you can play city league basketball, you can play a little slow pitch softball, but that's about all the stuff you can do. And I saw an ad in the Las Vegas Sun paper here, and it said, when you're watching TV and you're watching games, do you yell at the officials, say you can do better? And I said, that's interesting. And if you think you can do better, come to Las Vegas High School on Sunday and sign up to become a referee. And that was probably in the mid-'60s. I don't know exactly now, so it's a long time ago. And I fell in love right from the start because I could still be part of the game. I did. Then I started refereeing City League, and then football. You start with Pop Warner, and you go to freshman, then junior varsity, and finally you get to college. And so that's how I progress, a step at a time. I officiated. I've been involved with the officials for over 50 years, so it's really been just a labor of love.
So, Marc, I'm going to keep you there for a second with your background because I didn't know until very recently. In fact, when I saw you in February of this year, I had no idea that you had been a Division I football official. So can you kind of tell us what conferences did you work? How long were you a Division I football official? I got to see cool pictures in your office of you working some games. Would love to hear about that journey.
This goes back to 1986. Anyway, I would go to UNLV would have scrimmages every year, the summer or the spring scrimmages, and we would try out to get into, at that time was called the PCAA, Pacific Coast Athletic Conference Association, and I don't think any of those schools still play football, excuse me. And so I believe in summer of '87, I got a call and they said, we're going to invite you to become an official in the Pacific Coast Athletic Conference. And UNLV was part of it in those days. And my first game I can remember was Weber State and Long Beach State. And I think the first year I did maybe 4 games. And that league, it broke up and became the Big West. I went to the Big West, and then I was getting 9, 10 games a year. UNLV left the Big West and went to the WAC, and so I followed them to the WAC, which was like 16 teams back then. Then they broke in half, and half the teams stayed with the WAC, and half went to the new Mountain West. And I went to the Mountain West, and I was lucky enough toward the end of my career, I got to work at the Independence Bowl and the Hawaii Aloha Bowl, and my last game of my career was the Cotton Bowl. So I really had
Awesome.
a wonderful time. But the biggest game I ever worked was at Notre Dame, BYU at Notre Dame. No offense to any bowl game, but that was the highlight for me in college officiating.
It's fantastic. And your journey as you were talking about the WAC when it was 16 teams. I went to the University of New Mexico and I remember those WAC games. The final score was always like 72-65. It was like defense optional those days. So I just remember those WAC games that were just. I'm like, is that basketball score? No, that was football. But that was always interesting. And I know you also. Do you still work at the table at UNLV?
I know I last year was my last year. I retired from that. I was a shot clock operator, I think, for 42 years. That's a
Oh
long
my.
time. Through all the Tarkanian years, and I loved it. And the big highlight was 2 years ago. We had the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, and I got to run the clock and listen to the coach from Connecticut yell at the officials once they went by. He sort of waited till they went by,
Okay.
but the coach was he was noisy.
Very animated for sure.
Yes.
And thanks for all that history. I just know listeners, Marc Ratner, he's done a lot, but I know he's very, very humble. So that's why I'm like making him tell the story because it's fascinating to me. So, Marc, I appreciate you letting me prod you. So, I mentioned a little bit in the intro about your passion for high school sports and high school officiating. And I know the scope of that has definitely changed in the past, 15 to 20 years. But what is it for you that's so what do you love so much about education-based athletics in particular?
There was just something, like I said, there was a purity to it. My son was a good high school basketball player. I would sit in the stands, and I'm the commissioner of officials, and I had the opposing coaches yell at me. I would have the players' parents yell at me. I just sit by myself. My wife was yelling at the officials too, so I had to go sit by myself in the stands. But uh, yeah, there was one of the big joys of my life actually was being able to watch all these games with my son playing. That was very important. We didn't miss any games, and then he went away to James Madison and had a scholarship there, so we could follow him on TV or follow him on the internet. But yeah, there's something special about high school. But as a commissioner, I would have to back before really that we got film on all these games. I would have to go to a school and watch film with the coaches and meet with the principals, meet with the athletic administrators. And whatever school I went to, the officials were always wrong. The school was always right, which is probably still the way it is. But the most important thing in anything you do is listen and communicate. And I think if you don't go there or don't try and call them, that's where the mistakes are made. And so I really believe in that. to this day, when I get phone calls, I don't have anybody screen my calls. I just pick it up. I'm better off than judging who I want to talk.
That's awesome.
You know, the one piece that we did miss in your experience, and I'm gonna tie it into the next question. And you have worked all three levels of sports in some capacity, either high school, collegiate, professional. You know, kind of talk to us about how you got into professional, boxing and UFC, and we kind of missed that part. And then, what are some of the challenges that have come with all three levels?
Well, I was a big boxing fan here in town growing up, and I would go to the big fights and just try and buy a ticket. In those days, they weren't as expensive, obviously, as now. But one of the first big fights I went to was Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson. So this goes back, it's 1963, so it's really a long time ago. And those days, if you wanted to get even a rock and roll ticket, you had to get up early and go get in line. And so
Camp out.
and so I saw this little ad in the paper, and it said tickets go on sale for Patterson and Liston, 8 o'clock, some like Thursday morning or something. So I went there at 7 o'clock. I was the first person in line, and about four $10 tickets. It was the top row of the old convention center, and I've saved that. I still have one of those tickets that I saved. But when I started doing the clock at UNLV, a lot of the boxing people would see me at UNLV, and one of my close friends that I coached softball with, he said, "You ought to get involved, and you love going to boxing. You ought to apply to become an inspector." And an inspector in boxing is the one who, in the dressing room, makes sure that the gloves don't have a roll of quarters, as they say, or have anything in them. You have to check the gloves, and you have to make sure that they do everything by the rules, not put too much Vaseline on. And so I got involved in the back rooms, and I did that for a while. Then my friend became the director of the commission. He was a judge, and he had me become what they call the chief inspector. I would assign the inspectors. I would also pay the fighters in those days. And sadly, in the early 90s, he passed away from a very rare form of cancer. And the governor and the five commissioners appointed me in 1992 to become the executive director of the athletic. And I was until I think 2005. I was at in 2001. One of the former commissioners, and you know the name Dana White, they bought the UFC, and in 2005, they said, "Look at you understand the sport. We had approved it in Nevada. Have you ever thought about coming over to the UFC and working for us?" I said, "No, I have the best regulatory and government job probably in the world." But we talked again at the end of 2005, I think early in 2000. Lorenzo Fertitta was one of the owners. He owns a lot of he and his family hotels here. And so he was sort of the salesman. And we're having breakfast, and he brought the closer in. He brought Dana in, and I talked it over with my wife and some of my business mentors, and came over here. I think it was Cinco de Mayo 2006, 20 years almost right now. And I still go to boxing, but it was one of the best moves I could have made from so many standpoints.
Thanks. And now, Mark, with that, being in the three realms, right? Collegiate sports as a football official, high school sports, and professional. What are some of the biggest challenges involved with each of these?
The high school sports was really learning the sports and getting to know the rules and really being on the field and progressing. That was really important to do a state championship. That's as far as I really, really wanted to do, to go up to Reno and do a state championship. And you get a taste of that, then you want to go further. And then when you go to college, you want to work as many games and hopefully that someday you would get a bowl game. And I think I was in the different conferences in the Mountain West for at least 12 years before I got a bowl games. They would, it's funny, the different commissioners would say, "Can you help make reservations in Vegas for something?" And I want to say, "But what about the game?" But finally, I was able to ascend into that. When it comes to the pros, a lot of my friends had gone on from college officiating and got into the NFL, and they said, "The Raiders are coming to Vegas. You ought to get involved." And I said, what does that entail? I don't have any idea. And so they gave me some people to call, and they had different positions, game clock and play clock. And the position that I found interesting was coach to player cutoff operator, which means you open the mics up as soon as the play's over for the offense and defense. And then when the play is whistled dead, you close it at 15 seconds. Let me go back. You close it at 15 seconds. Then when the play is, you want to start it again as soon as the play's over, and they have till 15 seconds to call their play. But if you ever see a quarterback looking up at the press box saying, I can't hear, then you know that the coach to player really screwed up. So, but we've been very blessed there. This is our 6th year with the Raiders. And last year, it's like a contest between every home team, and the play clock, game clock, and the coach to player. We were selected to go to New Orleans 2 years ago to do a Super Bowl. So that was a big thrill for us.
I did not know this about you. See, every time I'm around you, I learn something new about your resume. You've lived like 15 lives. It's unbelievable.
I've been very blessed.
It's amazing. So I have to tell a very quick, funny story. So when I was at your headquarters in February, I got in an Uber to take me from UFC over to the airport. The guy pulls up and I walk out to his car and I get in and he looks like disappointed. And I'm like, what's going on? He saw my first name was Dana and he thought that I was Dana White, like traveling under an alias. I have never seen a more disappointed Uber driver in my life because he's like, oh, good afternoon. And I'm like, how's it going? And I'm trying to talk to him. And he goes, I have to tell you something. He goes, I saw your first name. And he said, when you walked out, I was not expecting you. And I was like, well, I'm so sorry. I had to make sure I tipped him well because I ruined his day when I walked out. But I was like, I'm pretty sure Dana White's not taking an Uber. I don't know. I can't imagine I can't imagine he's rolling around Vegas in an Uber, but
He's got a lot of fast cars. I can say that.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't think he got picked up in your Toyota Corolla. Sorry, but no offense to a Toyota Corolla, but I'm sure Dana White's not rolling around Vegas in one. So, um, so we're gonna, get a little bit more into the topic of the day. You and I talked when I saw you about growing up. I grew up watching fights on HBO with my dad. It was what we did together. We'd pop popcorn and we'd watch the fights. And little did I know that you were probably in the frame of those often. Didn't know that when I was younger.
No.
So as you were going through all of those amazing fights that took place over the year, what are some of your most memorable moments in boxing that you witnessed from your front row seat outside the ring?
Well, I have, as we said, a lot of stories, and I always have to give you dates and stuff, but this goes back to 1993, director of the commission. There was a certain sound in the crowd. It's Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield outside at Caesar's Palace. And there's a sound in the crowd where you know something's going on behind you. It's usually a fight at a fight. All the people were turning around watching. And but I was watching. It's the 7th round of this fight. And out of the sky comes this, I call him an intruder. He's got a fan contraption. He's strapped in with a parachute on it and lands into the ring with his feet over the ropes. And it's right there in the 7th round. And we stopped the fight, obviously. And the famous announcer, Michael Buffer, kept the crowd calm. If this happened in 2003, we would have thought it was some kind of a real terrorist or something. But it's 1993. And my mistake that night was I didn't send the fighters back to the dressing room. There's nothing in the rule book that says, what do you do now when a guy flies into the ring? So, but in retrospect, and I told this to Evander Holyfield, I should have sent you back to the dressing room. It was a November night and it was cold out there. We had blankets. But from officiating, this is one of the most important parts of our talk here. Most games have a clock of some kind, maybe except for baseball. Now they got a pitching clock. But I knew enough to go right to the timekeeper and say, how much time is left in the round? And he said, I think it was 1:20. And then I went to each judge and said, listen, this fight may not continue, but on the back of your scorecard, put down who you think was winning that round. Because if the fight continues, we're going to have to score that round. So 21 minutes was the delay. And the fight started again. One judge scored a 10-9 for Evander, one 10-9 for Riddick Bowe, and one judge scored a 10-10 and made it even round. And at the end of the fight, if the judge who had scored a 10-10 had given that to Riddick Bowe 10-9, then that fight would have ended up to being a draw, and Riddick would have kept his title. So it did change the course of heavyweight history. And hardly anybody knows that part, but that's where officiating really helped me.
That is wild. Yeah, there's definitely nothing in the rule book for a parachute guy, like, in any rule book. That's something, and
But
that's amazing.
the other incident, which everybody knows about, most of them, and you can Google or YouTube the fan man, they call them. But this is Mike Tyson and Evander, poor Evander, the same referee, Mills Lane, that was in both of these fights. And Mike thought Evander butted him and cut his eye in the third round, which I didn't know at that very moment. Mike bit his ear. And I had thought the referee called me up and said he bit him. And I thought he had kneed him or something, and his cup pinched him or something. And the referee said, I'm going to disqualify him. And one of the things, once again, in officiating we learn about is when in high school or college, you go up to the main referee, the head referee, and say, I'm going to eject number 42. And the referee would always say, what'd you see? Are you sure? And so all I asked the referee was, are you sure you want to DQ him? Now, I wasn't thinking about this 18,000 people there and worldwide television. I just by being an official, I asked him that question. And he said, let's bring the doctor up. The doctor said, he can go on. It's not going to affect him fighting. And then Mike bit him again, and then certainly the fight was over. But those were two of my big infamous moments in my career.
The Tyson fight, I remember watching that with my dad, and he goes, I think he bit him. And I looked at my dad. I was like, that's ridiculous. He did not. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he bit him. And it was and Mills Lane, legend boxing referee. I mean, that was the one boxing referee I always knew was Mills Lane. So that's crazy. And like I said, you've had the front row seat to so many amazing, legendary boxing matches. And you were definitely around during what I consider to be kind of the golden age of boxing. Like there was just every fight was amazing. Like,
yeah, very special time and a lot here in Las Vegas.
Well,
absolutely.
And I just think about the impact that you had on both of those situations, right? In the officiating world, you never know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And for our listeners out there, I always like to relate what we do. If you're an official, sometimes you do have to think on your toes, and you have to think outside the box, and you kind of go back to your training, going back to the fundamentals, even though there is no rule on ear biting or or people flying into the ring, there are instances that you can still use other situations that you've had and, and somehow manage the situation. And Mark, man, what a really cool set of historic events that you were a part of, and how you used officiating to really just your basic fundamentals of officiating to manage these really outside the box situations.
The most interesting thing, because a lot of people said, Mark, you talked Mills out of it, and if Mike would have knocked out Evander right after the first bite, nobody would be talking to me today, because then it would have been my fault. And
You're right.
I mean, that's how crazy
Well, and
life.
and it's crazy because I don't think I think had you known that you just asked the question, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
you
all.
got the response, and the referee said, "You know what? Let's ask the doctor." But had you, I think maybe if the communication had been a little different, you would have definitely handled that situation maybe a little different, and that's where good communication and officiating always is important, because sometimes you need all the facts before you make a decision that's really going to impact history.
It's certainly a big moment or a infamous moment. And I mentioned Mills, and Dana, you mentioned his name too. He is in the NASAO Gold Whistle,
He is.
Yep.
and he's passed away now. One of the one of my most favorite. He was a district attorney, a judge, and just a great, great guy and a tremendous referee.
He was awesome. I
That's
loved watching
amazing.
that guy. Oh my gosh. So cool.
When he said, "Let's get it on," you knew the fight
Let's
was
get it
getting ready.
on. It pumped me up like I was ready.
Okay, so Mark, you began working for UFC in 2006 after
Yes.
serving at the Nevada Athletic Commission for over 20 years. How difficult was the transition from the ring to the octagon?
Fundamentally, it's a different sport, but fundamentally, my part was the same. What they wanted me to do here at the UFC was help them get the sport approved of mixed martial arts. And so not only me, I had a lawyer who traveled with me. Sometimes Dana would go, sometimes a couple others, excuse me. But we went to different state capitals. So when I came in 2006, I think 20 states had approved the sport. So we would go to state capitals, and you can't just walk into a state senator's office or a state assemblyman's office. You have to get a lobbyist to get you in there. And we would try to educate the different senators and assembly people, and their staff usually knew about UFC, but it took us going around the country doing that. And then we came to New York. Every state had approved the sport. And there was a labor problem here in Las Vegas with the Culinary Hotel Workers Union. Their sister union in New York, the New York Hotel Workers Union, they were able to stop us from getting a vote in the New York legislature. It took us 8 years to finally get a vote. That's a lot of winters in Albany that I had to go to. But in 2016, they finally approved the sport, and that was very emotional moment for me because I was sitting in the House of whatever assembly, and when they finally passed, yeah, it made me emotional. And I remember, I don't tweet out very much, but I said that I'm finally in a New York state of mind. And uh, and then when we had our first fight there in November with our guy Conor McGregor, who was fighting a guy named Eddie Alvarez. And I looked around before the start of the fights, and it was standing room only at the Garden, 18,000 people, and it really was special for me to have been involved and help get the sport regulated. And when I first came to work for us for the UFC, they talked about going to New York a little bit, but we never talked about the rest of the world. And I have been blessed enough to go around the world and help get the sport regulated there.
And it is huge. It's just you can't go anywhere without knowing about it and knowing your role and hearing what you went through. And you and I had talked a little bit when I was at your office about what it took in New York. I understand that. And anybody who loves it like you do, it's going to be emotional. And I appreciate you sharing that story. So I know you've had several fights recently and one coming up in the next couple of weeks. So in your current position, what does an average fight week look like for you, and how different is it from when you were working with boxing?
It's pretty much the same as boxing. The big difference for me is we'll make a fight like in Seattle, and the people who are doing the venue say, we're going to go to Seattle in March. This is probably sometime late January. So my first thing I must do is call the commission in Washington and make sure that the date is available and say, we're going to come there. And I just want to let you know, can I send you an email to reserve the date? And everybody wants us to come because it's big revenue for the state, and so we don't have a problem. And then maybe 2 weeks later, we'll discuss the officials. And what's not funny, I guess, every state thinks they have the best officials in the world. That's just automatic. And I would say, you're going to have 16, 17,000 people there, and it's a lot different than working in a little ballroom with maybe 300 people there.
For sure.
And what I'd like to do is supplement your officials with some of these world-class officials. I'll send you a list of names, maybe 8 or 10 different referees, same with the judges. You select them. I don't want to select them, but this will make your officials better, and pick 2 or 3 of these referees. You'll have 2 of your own. And so we do that. And then what we do is we communicate with the commission, send them the fight card. They have to approve the fighters fighting each other, make sure that in the commission's eyes that they would be competitive. So, and we're working on more than one fight at a time. Today, I mean, if all things, I'm working on some stuff in May in Macau, which I'm not going to. It's too far. But yeah, I'm working on that. You have to work in the way in advance. But the big thing that we must discuss is the White House. We're going to the White House
That's
on the
right.
lawn. I was going to say it's on Flag Day, but it's also the president's birthday. He's going to be inviting whomever. You can't just go to it. There's no tickets for anybody. It's a invitation from the president and some from Dana, and there'll be a lot of senators. You have to be vetted by the Secret Service. I mean, it's a real production. But yesterday we were working on contingencies because everything's outside. And what happens if there's a big rainstorm or a rain? Because all these people, it's not in a big tent or anything. It's on the lawn at the White House. So yeah, we're trying to have alternatives, and then you have TV involved. You have a weigh-in on Saturday to make sure that's 24 hours before the Sunday fights. If it gets rained out and we have to do it on a Monday, do they have to reweigh? There's a lot of questions. So yeah, so it's yeah, we're working on that, and it'll be on Paramount TV. It'll be probably one of the most watched events ever, and it's going to be a prestigious thing. It's not going to be a good money thing because there is no gate. There's no charge. But Dana loves to do things to be the only one or the first one, and we did a fight 2 years ago at the Sphere here in Las Vegas, which was really unbelievable to have a fight there, and it's a great place for rock and roll. It turned out okay, but it's more suited for rock and roll.
I can't imagine trying to plan something at the White House. You're dealing with logistics you've never had to worry about before, like Secret Service, and everybody's got to be background checked to be able to go. I mean, that's insane. That stuff, I know you do a lot of work and setup, but now you're dealing with this whole other layer of stuff you've never had to worry about
Well,
before.
luckily, or I don't know, but the president has been to 5 of our fights,
Okay.
and so he sits there. My philosophy is whether you agree or not agree with the way he does business, I still the president. To have him sit at cage side is amazing to me that a president would do that, and he likes the sport. And I sit about 5 seats away from him and don't move during the whole fight because I know the Secret Service is watching everything. So I just sit there.
You're not
Stay
trying to
still.
It's fascinating.
Has to be.
You actually answered my next question, and but if you need to add to it, but 20 years of UFC experience, what are some of the biggest change that you have seen um, over the years?
Well, we're always trying to do better with the officials, trying to because it's mostly judgment. We have seminars, much more, and now with the Zoom and the internet, we have some teaching classes from the California Commission does a lot of that, and the New Jersey Commission. So we're always striving to make the officials better, make the judges more consistent. But the actual fights themselves, the fighting has changed where maybe 15 years ago, it's much more advanced now. Fighters are learning to fight with their jujitsu and their wrestling now more in high school than it was then. So we have a lot younger demo or fighter, a lot more women. Ronda, she changed the way we looked at fights and tremendous. She was our highest paid fighter when she was fighting. That's how she had at the Honda Center in Anaheim. She was the main event, which was, if we'd have said that 15 years ago, nobody would have believed it. Now she's going to fight, not for us. She's going to fight out of retirement, Gina Carano. That'll be a fun fight too. But if we're not involved with it at all.
So, Mark, you have been inducted into the Southern Nevada Officials Association Hall of Fame, the International Boxing Hall of Fame, the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, and the UFC Hall of Fame. What do all of those honors mean to you?
I mean, it's for my family. They love it, and not to be immodest, but the NIAA Hall of Fame too now.
Good. Congratulations on that.
In the high school, but no, I mean it's wonderful. It's great, but I'm more of a background guy, and very hard for me to talk about myself. I can do it this way. This is fun, but to go up before a big like the International Boxing Hall of Fame when I did that, it's outside of Syracuse, and I look behind me, and there's Roberto Duran, there's Ray Leonard, there's Tommy Hearns, and yeah, what am I doing here? I mean, it's just overwhelming. But yeah, I've been very, very lucky and very blessed.
And you've earned every single one of them. And I know I knew that question was going to make you uncomfortable because you are so humble, but I wanted to make sure our listeners understood the caliber of individual that we were having this conversation with. So thank you for thank you for letting me make you feel uncomfortable for a minute. I appreciate that.
Okay.
You mentioned your family, and as part of your career outside the ring, you have been able to travel the world. How are you able to balance your day job, your officiating, and of course, most importantly, your family?
Well, I mean, the wife is the most important part there, and she has always been my biggest supporter. I try to bring her a little something from my little trips, and like this trip to Seattle, I left Thursday night and was back Sunday before noon, and she's been very understanding that way. And my kids now are 37 and 38, and my daughter's, for whatever reason, a big wrestling fan. I don't know why she likes WWE, and we're having WrestleMania here, and she reminded me yesterday, don't forget, you got to help me get some WrestleMania tickets. My son, who's besides being a good basketball player, he's a good fan of other sports, and he yeah, so he's been to fights with me, and it's been some UFC fights. So yeah, but it is a balancing act, and yeah, I know that when I come home from these trips, I better stay home, and I do. But it's yeah, balance is the right word.
And I think one of the biggest indications of your wife being your number one fan was when I was in your office and you showed me the display of all of your credentials, and you had said that that was kinda her idea, if I remember correctly, and
Right.
that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I was like, "Oh my gosh." It was awesome. So, supportive spouse definitely helps. So, thank you to her. So, Mark, we got the topic for this episode from your book entitled, and I'm gonna look at that.
Well, thank you, dear.
Your book entitled Ringside: My Life Outside the Ropes and the Octagon. Can you tell us about that book and what inspired you to write it?
I never thought about writing a book, and two of our people from they were at that time it was WME, and they said, you talk about these stories, you should write a book. I said, I can't sit down and write a book. They said, we'll get you a ghostwriter, and that's how you do it. And so the first ghostwriter he wanted to have more gossip stuff, and what do you think about Tyson and that kind of stuff. And so we said, no, that's not the kind of book that I wanted to do. And so then we got another one, and it's mostly you would talk to the writer for about 3 hours, and then he would send a chapter to you, and then you would redline and edit the way you wanted it. So it took us about probably 8 or 9 weeks is all, but 3 hours at a time. But these executives from William Morris, I said, I'll write it. I don't care about any proceeds from it, but I don't want to have to pay for a ghostwriter or publishing. And they said, no, no, this is the way we'll do it. And so I get a little something from Amazon every once in a while. Not a lot of money, but it's an easy read as you saw, and it was fun for me to do. And some of the stuff in the book we talked about today. But it just reminded me of another thing. During my time with the Athletic Commission, I was involved in two movies, just little bit parts. But one was a Rocky Balboa movie, so I got to play myself and say Rocky Balboa 217. That was my one line, but you get residuals from talking. So I got a $21 check last week. So
Oh my gosh, don't
and
spend
and
that
that,
all in one place.
and that movie was probably 24 years ago. So I still
So,
get
I did not know that until I was reading your book, and I'm sitting at the house, I look at my husband, I was like, "Mark was in Rocky." I was just like, "This is so cool." So it was, by the way, great book. Check it out on Amazon. Get a copy if you're a boxing fan, a sports fan, anything. Outstanding. And thank you, Mark.
Hey, Mark, outstanding. I mean, man, we could sit here for a while and just listen to all the stories. That would be amazing. But a final question for you, and it's one
okay.
that we ask all of our guests. The From A to Zebra podcast has a mission each week, and that's to educate, elevate, and excite our listeners. What can you tell our audience about officiating that accomplishes this mission?
You know, the two little things that I brought up that I did in the boxing matches from officiating, knowing to go to the timekeeper, knowing to talk to to the boxing referee. And I think what I learned mostly as a commissioner of officials, and once I became commissioner, I didn't want to compete with the high school guys, so I stopped refereeing, except for college football. But just learning how to deal with, because when you meet all the high school, as I said, the high school coaches, it's always the official's fault. So you have to learn how to communicate and talk and go through it. And all anybody wants is somebody to at least listen to them. And that's my philosophy.
It's a good philosophy to have. Marc Ratner, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know, like I said, you carved some time out. You've got a very, very busy schedule, a lot going on, and it just means the world that you spent time with us on the podcast. You're a tremendous advocate for sport. You're a tremendous advocate for officiating, and one of the best human beings I know. It's an honor to know you and to call you a friend, and I'm just so glad to have you on and introduce you to Nate, because he hears me talk about all the legends. And I do have to say, one of the career highlights of my life was going to the UFC headquarters. One of the coolest places I've ever been in my entire life. I was like, I want to work here. Like, it was so cool. Thanks for hosting us there, because I would have never had another opportunity, and it was amazing. So,
No,
Marc Ratner, thank you.
Last time you said you wanted to work somewhere, that was the NFHS office.
I know.
Well, actually, the NFL office, and there were opportunities, I'm sure. But if you put your mind to it, Dana, I think you can make that happen.
It's
And you
pretty cool
mentioned
there,
New
I'll tell you what.
Mexico, and that reminded me of probably before you were born, but I went to the Final Four to watch in 1983, Valvano
Yeah,
and
at
North
UNM.
Carolina State. And one of my favorite coaches to watch was Norm Ellenberger from New Mexico. They called him Storm and Norman or something.
Oh.
And Coach Tarquini and him were big rivals. And when UNLV played New Mexico, it was always big crowds.
Huge.
And that reminded me.
That is so funny. Too cool. Just so many stories, Mark, and just awesome. Again, read his book. You will not be disappointed. It's absolutely great. Marc Ratner, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and Nate will close us out.
And,
all right, lots of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on the From A to Zebra podcast. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X for more information about the show. You can also go visit our homies over at RefReps and find our full library of podcasts from all seasons on the resources page of refreps.com. Also, if you're an up-and-coming official, great resources there for you to get your officiating careers jump started. Those the folks over at RefReps have really done a really good job in officials education. So see you next time.
Be sure to hit that like button, follow, subscribe, and also catch From A to Zebra on Instagram at from_A_2_zebra, Facebook From A to Zebra podcast, and on X at From A to Zebra.